The adrenal glands are among the most important glands in the human endocrine system. They are located above the kidneys. In adults, they weigh a mere 4 to 5 grams. The adrenal glands have a layered structure. They are covered with a connective tissue capsule. Below the capsule is the adrenal cortex, and in the center, the adrenal medulla. The adrenal cortex constitutes the bulk of the adrenal gland, accounting for about 90% of its volume. The cortex and the medulla function completely independently of each other, so functionally they are two different endocrine glands. The adrenal cortex consists of 3 zones. Each of the zones produces steroid hormones that play different roles in the body. The hormones produced in the outermost zone, for example aldosterone, regulate the sodium level in the blood by promoting the reabsorption of sodium in the kidneys. The hormones produced in the middle zone affect carbohydrate metabolism in the body. These hormones act on the liver. They promote the storage of glucose and the conversion of lipids and proteins into glucose. This process is called glyconeogenesis and contributes to elevated blood glucose levels. The innermost zone of the adrenal cortex produces sex hormones, mainly male sex hormones in both sexes. The adrenal medulla is part of the sympathetic nervous system. The hormone-secreting cells of the adrenal medulla are neurons that have lost their axons and release hormones directly into the bloodstream. The most important hormone secreted by the adrenal medulla is adrenaline. This hormone stimulates the nervous system, boosts energy supplies, and raises blood glucose levels. The functioning of the adrenal cortex is mainly regulated by the pituitary gland. The hormone secreted by the pituitary gland, ACTH, reaches the adrenal gland via the bloodstream. Besides ACTH, the concentration of sodium in the body fluids also plays a role in regulating the adrenal cortex. If the sodium concentration decreases, the secretion of the aldosterone intensifies in the adrenal cortex. In response to stress or emergency situations, hormone production increases in the adrenal medulla. In such cases, the sympathetic nervous system activates and can directly stimulate the production of adrenal medullary hormones, for example, adrenaline or epinephrine, with the help of sympathetic neurons.
Human homeostasis, or the dynamic stability of the internal conditions of the body, can be threatened by a number of factors. In such a situation, a stress reaction is produced in response to the stimulation of the nervous system and the hormonal system. This reaction helps us to avoid danger and maintain homeostasis. In a stressful situation, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, stimulating the release of a hormone called adrenaline, or epinephrine, by the adrenal medulla. The combined effect of adrenaline and the sympathetic nervous system leads to a fight or flight reaction. The main symptoms include dilation of the pupils, an increase in the heart rate and in the circulatory minute volume, a release of glucose into the bloodstream from the liver and skeletal muscles, causing an increase in blood glucose level, dilation of the blood vessels in the brain, skeletal muscles, and heart, and constriction of the blood vessels in the intestines, kidneys, and skin. The smooth muscle in the blood vessels found in different organs contains either alpha or beta adrenaline receptors. When binding to alpha receptors, adrenaline causes blood vessels to contract, while binding to beta receptors, it dilates blood vessels. The smooth muscle in our intestines, kidneys, and skin typically contains alpha receptors. When the adrenaline is bound, the alpha receptor activates the G protein, which has 3 subunits. Its alpha subunit converts GDP into GTP, and then activates the phospholipase C enzyme. Phospholipase C breaks the PIP2, that is, the phosphoinositol diphosphate molecule into IP3 and DAG, that is, inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. IP3 causes the endoplasmic reticulum to release calcium ions, while DAG activates the protein kinase C enzyme. Calcium ions and protein kinase C have the joint effect of contracting smooth muscle cells, constricting blood vessels, and decreasing the blood supply to the organs. The smooth muscle in our heart, brain, and blood vessels typically contains beta receptors. Thus, the blood supply to these organs is increased during an alarm reaction. Adrenaline binds to the beta receptors in the smooth muscle of blood vessels. This activates the G protein. The alpha subunit replaces the GDP with a GTP and activates an enzyme called adenylate cyclase. This enzyme converts ATP into cyclic AMP, also known as CAMP. This results in the dilation of blood vessels and thereby the increase of the blood supply to the organ. As adrenaline causes the contraction of certain blood vessels and the dilation of others, it basically sends blood to the skeletal muscles, the heart, and the brain. As an effect of adrenaline, the blood glucose level rises, thus providing energy for the muscles, the heart, and the brain. Glucose is stored in a polymer form as glycogen, primarily in the liver and the skeletal muscles. This is the quickest source of glucose in the body. The beta receptors in liver cells bind adrenaline. Then the alpha subunit of the G protein activates the adenylate cyclase, which synthesizes cyclic AMP. CAMP activates the protein kinase A enzyme. This phosphorylates and thereby activates the glycogen phosphorylase enzyme, which catalyzes the release of glucose phosphates from glycogen. The phosphate groups in the glucose phosphate molecules are removed by an enzyme, and glucose is released into the blood. The heart muscle contains a large amount of a subtype of the beta receptor, the beta-1 receptor. Since adrenaline stimulates the heart through this receptor, drugs known as beta blockers can be used to reduce the load on the heart. There are selective beta-1 blockers, but there are those that act on all types of beta receptors. The use of beta blockers may be necessary for disorders of the heart rate, or high blood pressure, or after a heart attack in order to relax the heart muscle.